"You're lying." Sergeant Dallas Bruner said it loud enough to carry down the whole firing line. "You never served a day in your life, so prove it. Right here. Right now." The woman he said it to did not flinch. She stood on the gravel behind firing point 6 of a Marine Corps known distance range, a lanyard badge at her collar that read, "Visitor" in flat black letters, plain trousers, a plain shirt, no rank on her anywhere because there was nowhere on civilian clothes to put it. She looked to be somebody's wife, somebody's contractor, somebody who had taken a wrong turn off the main road and wandered onto a range on a slow morning and did not belong. She had been called worse by better. Bruner planted himself in her path with his clipboard against his chest like a shield. He was 27 and built for it, and he ran this line the way a small man runs a small kingdom, which is to say, completely. Behind him, a scatter of junior Marines drifted closer, drawn the way people are always drawn to the promise of someone else's bad morning. The sun was already high. 900 meters of mown lane ran out flat and green to the target pits, and the wind came off them in a slow, warm push that smelled of cut grass and rifle solvent. "I asked you a question." He leaned in. "You got a card? A story? Anything? Because from where I stand, you're a tourist, and tourists don't touch my line." The woman's name was Camille Rourke. She was 49 years old. She said nothing, and she did not look at Bruner while he talked. She looked at the line. She looked at the way the firing points sat unmanned in the middle of a duty day, at a ready box left open to the dust, at a safety posting curled and faded on its board. Her hands hung open and still at her sides. Her weight sat even over both feet. Nothing about her moved that did not need to. That was the first thing, if anyone had been reading her. She was not enduring the moment. She was taking inventory. There was a second thing, smaller, and only Coyne caught it. When Bruner had first blocked her path, most people flinch back half a step without knowing they'd do it. A little animal concession to a bigger animal. Rourke had not given the half step. She had not leaned in either. She had simply held her ground at the exact distance a person holds when they have decided, a long time ago and for good, that no man's noise is going to move their feet. You learn that distance in one specific way. You learn it by having been somewhere the noise was real, and having stayed anyway. Coyne had been to that place himself once, on the far side of the world, and he knew the posture of someone else who had, the way one old sailor knows another by the way he stands on a moving deck. He looked at the woman with the visitor badge and the flat, quiet hands, and a cold, small certainty began to build in him that Sergeant Bruner was making the worst mistake of his young career and did not have the first idea. The range around them was a green machine running badly. Rourke could see it in 10 seconds. Firing points 4 and 7 with no coach on the mat. A ready box left gaping to the grit. 3 young Marines downrange in the pit line who should have been rotated an hour ago, going slack the way people go slack when nobody is watching the watchers. The morning was soft and slow, and the discipline had gone soft and slow with it. And that softness was the actual danger on a range, not the woman in civilian clothes. And it was exactly the thing she had driven 4 hours to find. A lance corporal off to the side laughed behind her hand. A young Marine named Milena Cardoza, 20 years old, buying a little safety with the sound of it. In the shade of the range tower, a much older man stood with his arms folded and did not laugh at all. Master Gunnery Sergeant Abel Coyne had run this line for 11 years and coached it for longer, and something in the woman's stillness had made his eyes narrow the second she stepped out of the visitor's lot. 19 years earlier, the same hands had been very busy. The memory came and went in a single hard beat, the way old things do. A canal road, a diesel engine idling low, a young sergeant's palm flat against a hot steel hatch rim waiting for a convoy to move. Then it was gone, and it was only Brunner again, and the smell of grass, and the sun. "Firing point 6, Rourke said. It was the first thing she had said. Her voice was even and low, and it carried without effort. "I'd like to use it." "You'd like to." Brunner laughed. He looked back at his audience to make sure they got it. "She'd like to." "No. What you'd like is to get in your little car and drive back to whatever office sent you, before I have you walked off my installation for being where you don't belong." Rourke looked, for the first time, directly at him. It was not a hostile look. It was worse than that. It was patient. She stepped past him, unhurried, and picked a rifle out of the ready box, the way a person picks up something they have held 10,000 times, with no ceremony and total certainty. And Sergeant Dallas Brunner smiled, absolutely sure he was about to watch a civilian woman embarrass herself in front of his line. She did not embarrass herself. Rourke went down onto the mat at firing point 6, with the ease of water finding its level. She set the rifle into her shoulder, and her body arranged itself around it in a way that had nothing to do with thinking. The elbows, the cheek, the line of the spine, every angle already correct. She let a breath out and let the front of the sight settle where it wanted to settle. She did not rush the wind. She read it. The 500-yard line, a target the size of a man's chest, small and pale against the far berm. The flags hung slack, but Rourke had not looked at the flags. She had felt the push off the pits on the back of her neck. She broke the first shot clean. The rifle came back into her, and she rode it and brought it down, and she was already on the second before the echo finished walking back off the berm. 5 rounds. She never hurried a single one of them. Between shots, her hands were as quiet as a sleeping thing. Down the line, the talking stopped. Coyne had come off the tower without anyone noticing and put a spotting scope on the target, and now he stood very still behind it. 5 rounds had gone into a single ragged group you could have covered with the flat of a hand, right of the center by an inch, exactly where a 500-yard shot goes when a shooter reads an 11-mile-an-hour crosswind and holds for it on purpose. 4-inch group, Rourke said, not lifting her cheek off the stock, right of center. Winds picked up out of the pits. 3/4 value. If your coaches are teaching these Marines to chase the flags instead of feeling the pits, that's why your afternoon scores fall off. She said it the way a mechanic says an engine is running lean. It was not a boast. It was a diagnosis, and it was full of the exact words, the terminology that lives only in the mouths of people who have spent years on a line, and it landed on Coyne like a hand on the shoulder. He had been coaching Marines to shoot for the better part of 2 decades, and he could count on one hand the number of times he had watched someone do what she had just done. It was not the group. Good rifles and good eyes make good groups, and the Marine Corps is full of both. It was the reading of the wind she had never looked at. It was the way she had called the correction before she fired instead of chasing it after, which is the difference between a person who shoots well and a person who understands, all the way to the bone, what a bullet does across 500 yards of moving air. That understanding is not bought, and it is not watched on a video. It is paid for in years, and Coyne knew the going rate. He straightened up from the scope and let his eyes travel down the line to the young sergeant still performing for his audience. And he thought, without heat, that some men spend their whole lives learning to tell the difference between loud and dangerous. And some men never learn it at all. And the ones who never learn it usually find out the hard way, on a morning exactly like this one. Brunner heard it too, and it frightened him. And because it frightened him, he did the thing frightened loud men do. He made it smaller. Anybody can get lucky once. He said it to the juniors, not to her. Buy a fancy rifle, watch some videos, get lucky. Doesn't make you a Marine. My grandmother could stack 5 if she held her breath long enough. Cardoza laughed again, but it was thinner now, and it did not reach the back of her throat. 19 years earlier, there had been another range, in a high desert a long way from here, the ground the color of a lion. A young Sergeant Rourke lay on a mat like this one, while a lean corporal named Everett Lund lay beside her and gave her grief about her scores, the way friends do when they mean the opposite of what they say. Behind the line, a major named Beckett Hargrove stood with his hands behind his back and watched his convoy crews shoot, and did not yet know that one of them would carry him out of the worst day of his life. None of them knew anything yet. That was the mercy of it. That was always the mercy of it. Back on the present-day line, Coyne lowered the spotting scope, and for the first time all morning, he looked at Sergeant Dallas Bruner, the way a man looks at someone walking, whistling, toward the edge of a cliff. Bruner did not see it. Men like Bruner never see it. He had decided how the morning was going to go, and a 4-inch group at 500 yards was not going to be allowed to change his mind. So he did the next thing, which was to turn the whole business into a bit. "All right, tourist." He clapped his hands once, briskly, gathering his line like a coach. "You got one lucky mat. Congratulations. Everybody, we got ourselves a real live gun range influencer today. Watch and learn." He gave her a name, because loud men always give you a name. He called her the tourist. He narrated her, mockingly, every time she moved. When she stood, he announced that the tourist was rising. When she looked downrange, he told the line the tourist was surveying her domain. The junior Marines laughed because it was easier than not laughing, and Cardoza laughed loudest of all, because she had already laughed once, and there is no lonelier feeling than being the only one who has stopped. Rourke let him have it. She walked the line slowly, and she did not perform being calm. She simply was. And while Bruner made a show of her, she made a quiet study of him and everything around him. She did not take out a phone, because she did not carry one where her hands worked. Her watch was turned face inward against her wrist, an old habit from a life where a bright dial at the wrong second could get someone killed. Her badge was clipped square. Her eyes moved along the line in a slow, even scan that started at the muzzles and worked back, and she noted the fouled ready box and the 2 firing points with no coach on them, and the safety brief that should have been read at first light and had not been. She was not surviving Sergeant Bruner. She was evaluating his range. Half the line could feel it without knowing why. A small wrongness under the joke, like a note held slightly too long. Bruner, sensing that his bit was not landing the way it should, worked harder for it. And a man working harder for a joke is a sad thing to watch. He mimed her stillness, standing exaggeratedly rigid, arms locked at his sides, and asked the line whether they thought the tourist practiced that in a mirror. He picked up a coaching stick and used it like a pointer, narrating her as though she were an exhibit. 2 of the newest Marines laughed because they were 19, and their sergeant was looking right at them when he made the joke, and there is no colder mathematics than the arithmetic of a 19-year-old deciding whether it is safe not to laugh. But the older hands on the line had stopped. They had seen the group at 500 yards, and they had seen the master guns go quiet, and some instinct, older than rank, was telling them that the ground had shifted under the morning, and their sergeant was the last one standing on the old map. Rourke let all of it wash past her and kept working her real problem. She walked to firing point 4, the one with no coach, and looked at the way the mats were laid, and the brass was policed, and the lane was marked, and she filed it. She looked at the safety posting curled on its board and read the date on it, and filed that too. She was building quietly in her head the report she would write tonight in a hotel room 4 hours from here, and Sergeant Bruner was going to be a single line in that report, a symptom, not the disease. The disease was a range that had gone slack because the man running it cared more about being the biggest voice on the line than about the 100 small, unglamorous things that keep Marines alive. Coyne felt it most of all. Twice he uncrossed his arms to step in, and twice Rourke caught his eye across the gravel and gave him the smallest shake of her head, a fraction of an inch, hold, and both times the old master gunnery sergeant settled back on his heels and obeyed a woman in civilian clothes with no rank anyone could see. If Brunner had been the kind of man who noticed things, that would have told him everything. A Marine of 30 years does not stand down for a tourist. 19 years earlier, in the last ordinary hour any of them would have, Sergeant Rourke and Corporal Lund had walked the length of a convoy, checking crew-served weapons in the gray before dawn, and Major Hargrove's voice had come over the net, calm and dry, telling them the route was cold and to move when ready. Ordinary competence, the kind that no one thanks you for and that costs everything when the day turns. If you have ever watched a loud person mistake a quiet one for a weak one, you already know how a morning like this ends. Stay with her. The quiet ones are the ones you have to watch. Brunner tore a page off his clipboard and began, in front of everyone, to write. And the joke, without anyone quite deciding it, became paperwork. He wrote for a while, with relish, and then he read it aloud, because a document is only a weapon if the room knows it exists. Range safety violation, Brunner announced. Unauthorized civilian present on an active firing line. Muzzle discipline infraction. Refusal to comply with the lawful instruction of range personnel. He looked up, pleased. That's the kind of thing that gets a contractor's base access pulled. Tourist. That's the kind of thing that ends a little day trip real fast. It was a lie in at least 3 specific and checkable ways, and Rourke knew every one of them, and she did not raise her voice. "Which range order are you citing?" she asked. Brunner blinked. "What?" "You wrote a muzzle discipline infraction. Under which range order? Give me the number." She was not baiting him. She was holding a door open and letting him decide whether to walk through it. "You cited a violation. A violation is a specific paragraph of a specific order. Tell me which one, and I'll tell you whether it applies." He did not know the number. He did not know there was a number. The junior Marines had gone quiet again, because even the newest of them had sat through enough range briefs to know that Rourke had just asked the one question a range coach should always be able to answer in his sleep, and their sergeant could not. He covered it the way he covered everything, by getting louder and by reaching for a witness. "Lance Corporal Cardoza saw the whole thing," Brunner said. "Cardoza. You saw her sweep the line with that muzzle, didn't you?" Milena Cardoza froze. She had not seen anything of the kind, because it had not happened, and now her name was on a page in her sergeant's fist, and she had a half-second to decide what kind of Marine she was going to be, and she was 20 years old, and she did the thing that frightened 20-year-olds do. She said nothing at all, which Brunner took for yes, and clipped his witness to his board. Rourke read the write-up without heat. She read it the way she read everything, all the way through, missing nothing. It cited a range order that did not cover firing line access. It described a muzzle discipline infraction at a firing point she had shot from cleanly in front of a dozen witnesses. It named a witness who had witnessed nothing. Each of those was not an opinion. Each was a fact that a 5-minute phone call would break, and a document that breaks under a 5-minute phone call is not a weapon. It is a confession waiting to be read back to the man who wrote it. She did not sign it. She handed it back and said only, "This is wrong in 3 places, Sergeant, and you will want it back before the day is over." And Brunner heard a threat in it, and puffed up, when what she had actually given him was a last, quiet chance. She had given a lot of people last quiet chances in her life. Some of them had taken the chance. The ones who had not were the ones she remembered, because a person who will not take a way out that is handed to them free is telling you something true about themselves, and it is never a good thing. Cardoza stood a few feet off with her arms wrapped around herself and her name on that clipboard, and Rourke marked it, and marked the girl's misery, and marked that misery is the beginning of a conscience, which is more than could be said for the sergeant. And she added the lance corporal to a different account entirely, the small private account she kept of people who could still be reached. Coyne could not stay out of it any longer, not with a fabricated statement and a junior Marine's name on a lie. Brunner, sensing the old man's disapproval and mistaking it for a problem he could order away, thrust the clipboard at him. "Master Guns, your range NCOIC. Co-sign the violation." Abel Coyne looked at the page for a long moment. He set his jaw. He did not sign. "Range duty officer's on his way," Brunner said, to the line, to Rourke, to himself, clipping the write-up back onto his board like a verdict already read. "He'll walk you off himself." 19 years earlier, the lead vehicle of a convoy had slowed on a canal road for no reason anyone could see, and the morning had gone too quiet, the birds gone, the ordinary sounds gone, and Corporal Everett Lund had keyed his handset and said, "Low, Sergeant, this doesn't feel right." And it wasn't. Coyne got Brunner alone by the ammunition point, out of earshot of the juniors, and he tried one more time, because that is what old NCOs do, even for men who have not earned it. "Sergeant." Coyne's voice was flat and quiet, the voice a man uses when he has stopped hoping to persuade you and is only leaving a record for himself. "I have coached this line for 11 years. I have seen a lot of shooters. I am telling you to tear that page up, and I am not going to tell you twice." "Or what, Master Guns?" Brunner's grin was tight. "She's a civilian. She's nobody. What do you care?" "That," Coyne said, "is the part you had better hope is true." Brunner heard an old man protecting a stranger. He heard nothing that outranked his own certainty. He did not tear up the page. And that was the tragedy of Sergeant Dallas Brunner in one small moment, because Abel Coyne had just handed him, for free, the second exit of the morning. And Coyne was not a man who handed out warnings twice or lightly. 30 years in the Marine Corps teaches an NCO to smell a coming disaster the way a farmer smells rain, and everything in Coyne's long experience was telling him that the woman on his line was somebody, and that the something about to happen to his sergeant was going to be permanent. And he had tried to say so in the only language he had, flat and quiet and without theatrics, and it had bounced off Brunner like a pebble off a windshield. Coyne walked back toward the tower with his jaw set, and a feeling in his chest he had not had in a long time, the specific dread of watching a young man load a rifle and point it, very slowly, at his own future. Apart from them, at the tower rail, Rourke stood with her back half to the line and watched the pits and the flags and the young Marines, who did not know yet what they were part of. She was doing arithmetic, the same arithmetic she had done her whole life, the arithmetic of how much a man deserves and how much a moment can be made to teach. Brunner had been cruel and small, and he had put a junior Marine's name on a lie. He had not yet done anything that could not be walked back. She was deciding how much of that mattered. Cardoza came to her at the rail. The apology died somewhere in the girl's throat before it could get out, and what was left was just a scared young Marine standing next to a stranger who had, for reasons she could not name, become the calmest thing on the range. Rourke did not make her say it. She looked out at the pits, and she spoke like she was talking about the weather. "You still get to choose what kind of Marine you are," Rourke said. "You laughed because it was easy. That's allowed once. But you've got all day, Lance Corporal. You've got all day to choose again." Cardoza's eyes went bright, and she looked away, hard at the targets, and did not answer. And Rourke let her not answer. 19 years earlier, the canal road had come apart all at once, noise like the sky tearing, dust standing up in a wall. The lead vehicle stopped and smoking, and 40 meters out in the open, past all cover, a major named Hargrove down and not moving. Watch what happens next. In a few minutes, a 3-star general is going to walk onto this range, and he is going to see this woman's face. keep watching to see what he does. It is the whole reason to stay. A staff car turned off the main road onto the range approach. Unhurried, official, a small flag on the fender, dust rising gold behind it in the morning light, and not one Marine on the line knew yet what it meant. What follows now belongs to the audience alone, because the range did not know it, and would not for another quarter of an hour. 19 years earlier, the Canal Road strong point had been a place with a name nobody would remember, and a shape everybody who was there would carry to the grave. A low mud wall on the near side, open ground past it, flat and pale and without mercy, 40 meters of it. And past that, the disabled lead vehicle and Major Beckett Hargrove, face down in the dirt with a wound in his belly, and both his radio men already down around him. Sergeant Camille Rourke was 27 years old, and she was behind the near wall with what was left of a security element, and the whole world was fire. The math was very simple and very cruel. Hargrove was 40 meters out in the open. The fire coming across that ground was heavy enough that crossing it was not a plan. It was a coin toss with a bad coin. 90 seconds, maybe, before the enemy walked their fire in onto the disabled vehicle and finished it. Nobody was going to order anyone across that ground. Nobody could. Corporal Everett Lund was 24, and he was on the wall beside her with a squad automatic weapon. And he looked at her, and he looked at the open ground, and he understood the arithmetic exactly as fast as she did, because they had trained together for a year, and they thought with one brain when it mattered. "Go, Sergeant." He was already up on the wall, already firing, putting a wall of his own up across that open ground, buying with his body and his ammunition the seconds she would need. "I've got the wall. Go." She went. She has never been able to describe the crossing to anyone, not to the board that gave her the medal, not to the counselors, not to herself at 3 a.m. She remembers it only as a set of facts, with the fear cut out of them, because there had been no room to carry the fear across. She had left it at the wall with Lund. She remembers reaching Hargrove. She remembers that he was heavier than a man should be, and that he tried, even gut-shot, to tell her to leave him, and that she told him something short and unkind, so he would stop wasting the air. She remembers getting him up across her shoulders. She remembers that her left forearm opened up somewhere in the crossing on a piece of flying metal, and that she did not feel it, and would not feel it for an hour. She remembers the wall coming toward her, and Lund's gun still going, and then Lund's gun not going. He held the wall. He did not come back over it. That was the trade, and he made it in half a second without being asked. And it is the reason a major became a colonel, and then a general, and the reason a young sergeant became an old warrant officer, and the reason both of them are still walking around under the sun. And there is not a day in 19 years that Camille Rourke hasn't known the exact weight of it. There is a thing that happens to the body in those 90 seconds that no one who has not been there will ever fully believe. The world narrows to a tunnel the width of the next handhold, the next meter, the next breath. Sound goes strange, near things far and far, things near. Time comes apart. She remembers the crossing not as a run, but as a series of still photographs with the terror edited out, because there had been no room in her arms to carry the terror. She had left it back at the wall, with Lund, along with everything else she could not bring. She remembers a spray of grit off the ground beside her hand. She remembers the exact moment the weight of Hargrove came off the dirt and onto her shoulders, and how the whole world changed shape around that weight. She remembers thinking, with a clarity that has never left her, that she was not going to be the reason a man died 40 meters from cover, and that if the ground was going to take somebody, it was going to have to take her too, and it had not. And Lund, it had. The internal arithmetic, the only place in this story she ever lets you inside her head. She got Hargrove. She did not get Lund. She could reach one wall, and not both. She has done that some 10,000 times looking for the answer where everyone lives, and it is not there. And she has made a kind of peace with the fact that it is not there. And the peace is a hard, flat stone she carries, and does not show anyone. A year later, in a hall full of dress blues, they hung the silver star on her, and a colonel read a citation that turned the worst 90 seconds of her life into 4 dry sentences. And she stood at attention and let them. And she has never once worn that medal where a range like this one could see it. It lives in a pocket. It is not for show. It was never for her. There is a photograph from that day that she keeps in a drawer and doesn't look at often. In it, a younger Camille Rourke stands very straight in dress blues, with her left forearm still wrapped, and her face is composed in exactly the way it is composed on the range this morning. The same flat quiet, because she had learned by then that the composure was the only way to get through a room full of people applauding the day her friend died. She had shaken every hand. She had said thank you the right number of times. And when it was over, she had gone somewhere private and been sick, and then she had squared herself away and gone back to work. Because Lund had bought her the days, and she was not going to waste them being a monument to her own grief. That was 19 years ago. She had kept the promise every single day since, and the keeping of it had made her, quietly, into the most dangerous kind of person there is, the kind with nothing left to prove and everything left to protect. And the signal that closes the trap around this ordinary morning is this. The staff car turning onto the range road carries Lieutenant General Beckett Hargrove on a routine command visit he scheduled months ago and thought nothing of. And he has spent 19 years quietly looking at the faces of the Marines on every base he has ever commanded, hoping to find one face, owing a debt the system was never built to let him pay. The man in that car has owed this woman his life since a canal road in a country far from here, and he is 30 seconds from the gate, and he does not know she is here, and she does not know he is coming. Back on the line, the day tipped over. The range duty officer was nearly there. Brunner could feel his little verdict about to be carried out, and something in the woman's endless patience had gotten under his skin in a way he could not stand, because a man like Brunner needs the people he humiliates to look humiliated, and Rourke would not give him that, and it made him reckless. He crossed the bright line. "You're done," Brunner said, and he reached out and took her by the left forearm to march her off his line, his hand closing hard on exactly the place where a piece of a canal road still lived under her skin as a pale seam of scar. He put his hand exactly where the war had already been. Rourke went very still, and it was a different stillness than before. The quiet of the morning had been patience. This was something colder and older, and it had a floor of steel under it. She looked down at his hand on her arm, and then she looked up at his face, and for the first time in the entire morning, Camille Rourke smiled. It was not a kind smile. "You should let go of my arm, Sergeant," she said, quiet, almost gentle. "Not for my sake." His grip tightened. He was going to make his point. Men like Brunner always make their point 1 second past the last exit. She let him. That was the thing the line would talk about later, in the barracks, in the smoke pit, for years. She let him take her arm, and she did not pull away. And it was not weakness, and it was not fear. It was a choice made by someone who had learned the hard way that there are moments you do not fight, because fighting is exactly what the other person needs you to do to stay the hero of their own story. If she had wrenched free, if she had put him on the ground, and she could have put him on the ground before he finished his next breath, then it would have become a story about a violent civilian, and the write-up would have grown teeth, and the whole clean shape of the morning would have blurred into a scuffle where everyone was a little bit wrong. So she stood, and she let a small, frightened man close his hand on the scar the war had left her, and she let the witnesses see exactly who was doing what to whom, because the truth in its clean shape was the only weapon she had ever really needed, and she had learned patience with it, in a place where patience was the difference between coming home and not. Her forearm remembered a different grip. 19 years ago, it had been the weight of a dying major slung across these shoulders, and one hand of her own clamped around his gear to keep him from sliding. And now, it was a sergeant's fist on the same arm in the sun of a home station range. And for one strange suspended second, the two pressures were the same pressure. The past and the present holding her by the same scarred place. And she stood inside both of them and did not move, because she had crossed worse ground than this to get here, and she was not about to run the last 10 meters. Coyne was already moving. Across the gravel Cardoza stepped, without deciding to, between the knot of junior Marines and the thing that was happening, choosing at last which way she was going to face, and it was toward Rourke. For half a heartbeat, the two timelines lay one over the other. The weight of a gut-shot major across these same shoulders 19 years gone, and now a small man's hand clamped on this same arm, two grips, two wars, the same forearm, and the woman standing under both of them without moving. And then, behind Brunner, boots came down on gravel, a car door thumped shut, and every Marine on that line, except the one holding her arm, snapped upright all at once, because they could see who had just stepped out of the staff car, and he was walking straight at them, and he was not slowing down. Lieutenant General Beckett Hargrove came around the front of the staff car, with his aide a step behind, 3 silver stars on each collar catching the high sun, 54 years old, and built like a fence post. And he had a general's habit of taking in a whole scene in one pass. His pass took in the range, the tower, the line of Marines coming to attention, the master gunnery sergeant already rigid, a sergeant with his hand on a civilian woman's arm and the civilian woman's face. He stopped 10 feet away as though he had walked into glass. Everything in him went still. It was not a performance, and it was not a decision. It was the oldest kind of recognition there is, the kind that comes up out of the body before the mind has caught up, and it hit a 3-star general in front of 40 Marines and stopped him cold. "Work," he said. It came out of him almost soundless. His hand came up off the brim of his cover. And then Lieutenant General Beckett Hargrove, who outranked every human being for 100 miles, straightened his spine and came to attention. Master Gunnery Sergeant Coyne was already there. He had been at attention since the general cleared the car, but now the audience understood it was not only for the stars. Nobody moved. The duty officer, arriving at a jog, stumbled to a halt at the edge of it and did not understand what he was seeing. Only that the most senior man he had ever stood near was standing at attention, and that he had better do the same. Hargrove found his voice, and when he used it, he pitched it to carry down the whole line, level and unhurried. A man laying something down carefully because it was heavy. 19 years ago, he said, this Marine crossed 40 meters of open ground under machine gun fire to carry me out of a canal road on the far side of the world. I had a hole in my belly, and both my radio men were down, and there was no reason on this earth for anyone to come across that ground. She came anyway. She put me on her shoulders, and she carried me back, and she took a wound doing it, and a corporal named Everett Lund held the wall so she could, and Lund didn't come home. He let that sit for 1 full second in the sun. I have looked for her face at every base I have commanded for 19 years. His eyes went, slowly, to Brunner's hand, still closed on Rourke's forearm. "Let go of the chief warrant officer," Hargrove said. "Now." Sergeant Dallas Bruner's face did the whole journey in about 3 seconds, and every Marine on the line watched it go. First confusion, the blank scramble of a man whose facts have all just moved. Then disbelief, the reflex refusal. This cannot be what it looks like. Then recognition, the awful click as the pieces slid home, the group at 500 yards, the exact terminology, the master gun standing down for her, the word chief warrant officer landing on the woman he had spent a morning calling a tourist. And then, last, horror, plain and total, as the size of what he had done opened up under him like the ground going out. His hand came off her arm as if the arm had turned to fire. The write-up was still clipped to his board. It was, suddenly, the loudest object on the range, a fabricated safety violation with a lance corporal's name forged onto it as a witness, held in the hand of a sergeant who had just laid hands on a decorated Marine in front of a lieutenant general. Rourke, at last, let herself stand at ease. Her hand settled. She had not raised her voice once. She had not needed to. The whole point of her, the thing the morning had been trying and failing to teach Sergeant Bruner, was that she had never needed to. The two timelines that had run all morning side by side finally met, and where they met was on the face of the man she had carried, standing at attention in the sun for a woman he had spent 19 years unable to thank. Hargrove looked at the clipboard. He looked at Bruner, and when he spoke again, it was not a threat. It was a real question, and it had all the weight in the world on it. "Son," the general said quietly, "do you understand what you just did?" What happened after that was not what the line expected, and it is the reason this story is worth telling. They expected an execution. A general was standing right there. A sergeant had fabricated an official document, forged a witness, and put his hands on a decorated warrant officer, and there was more than enough on that clipboard to end Dallas Bruner's career before lunch and put a permanent mark on the rest of his life. The junior Marines braced for it. Some part of them wanted it, the clean animal justice of watching a bully get erased. Rourke did not give it to them. She stepped away from the tower rail and, for the first time, she was openly what she had been all along, and she ran the range. She did not raise her voice to do it. She simply began to speak with the quiet, total authority of the person the whole system had sent, and everyone on the line reorganized themselves around her without being told, the way iron filings turn when the magnet comes near. "Master Guns," she turned to Coyne, "your ready box at point 6 is fouled. You've got 2 firing points running without a coach on a qualification day, and your morning safety brief wasn't read. Those are the things I came here to find. We'll walk them after the line is cold." Coyne said, "Aye, Chief Warrant Officer." And there was something close to a smile hidden in the granite of his face. Then she turned to Bruner, and the whole line leaned in for the blade. The blade did not come. "I could take your career this morning," Rourke said. She said it plainly, without cruelty, a fact laid on the table. "There's enough on that board to do it, and the general is standing right there, and no one would say a word if I did." She let him feel the whole size of that. "I'm not going to." Bruner's mouth opened, and nothing came out. "I don't want your career, Sergeant." She looked at him steadily. "I want you to be a better Marine tomorrow than you were this morning. That's harder than losing your stripes. Losing your stripes is over in an afternoon. Being better is work, and it takes years, and it starts with you standing here in front of these Marines you performed for and understanding, all the way down, exactly what you got wrong. You didn't get it wrong because I could shoot. You got it wrong because you decided a quiet person was a weak one, and you built a whole morning on it, and you were willing to forge a document and a Marine's name to protect the story you'd told yourself. Fix that. That's the assignment. I'll be checking." It landed harder than any punishment could have. The line was silent. Brunner stood in the wreckage of his own certainty, with nowhere to put his hands, and no story left to tell. And the mercy of it sat on him heavier than a court-martial would have, because a court-martial would have let him be a victim, and Rourke had just refused to let him be anything but responsible. Coyne watched and approved and said nothing, because the best corrections are the ones a young NCO never quite recovers from in the right way. There was a version of Sergeant Brunner standing there that could have taken what she gave him and grown into a better man than the one who woke up that morning, and there was a version that would spend years telling the story wrong, casting himself as the one the general almost destroyed, and the difference between those two futures had just been placed entirely in his own hands. Which was, Rourke knew, the hardest and fairest thing you could do to a person. Punishment ends. It closes the account and lets you walk away lighter. What she had handed him instead was a debt he would have to pay a little at a time, for a long time, in the only currency that mattered, which was the day-to-day work of being the Marine he had pretended to be. She did not know which version of him would show up tomorrow. She had made her peace, long ago, with not being able to control which wall the ground decided to take. All she could do was give a man the crossing. Whether he made it was his. Then Rourke went to the one person on that line who had earned something better than the morning had given her. She picked up the spotting scope from the tower, and she held it out to Lance Corporal Milena Cardoza. "You chose," Rourke said, low, just for her. "At the end there, you stepped the right way. That's the whole job, Lance Corporal, choosing right when it's easier to choose wrong. Now come put your eye on this glass, and I'll teach you to read the pits the way your sergeant couldn't. And the next time somebody quiet walks onto your line, you'll be the one who knows better." Cardoza took the scope with both hands, like it was something that might break, and her eyes were wet, and she nodded and did not trust herself to speak, and she went down behind the glass, and it was the beginning of a different Marine than the one who had laughed that morning. If you have ever waited, quietly, for someone to see who you really are, under whatever plain thing the world decided to call you, then you already understand why this channel exists. Subscribe to Honor Tales and stay for the ones who are still waiting to be seen. There are more of them than you think, and their stories are the ones we tell. The line went cold. The Marines racked and cleared and stepped back, and the range breathed out, and the ordinary business of a duty day slowly reassembled itself, changed. Hargrove and Rourke walked to the far end of the tower rail, away from the others, and for a little while the general and the warrant officer stood side by side and looked down 900 meters of quiet grass, and neither of them said anything at all, because between people who have shared a canal road, there is a kind of silence that says more than talking. Then Hargrove said one word. "Lund." "Held the wall," Rourke said. She looked at the targets, and not at him. "Every day I get, because he stayed on that wall. Everyone. That's not a sad thing, sir. It's just the arithmetic. I keep the account square by not wasting the days." Hargrove nodded slowly. He had his own version of that account, and he had kept it the same way, and it was the reason he had spent 19 years looking at Marines' faces. He did not offer her a ceremony. He knew better than to try. He did not call the base commander, or line up a formation, or reach for any of the machinery a lesser man would have used to make a moment out of it. He understood, because she had taught it to him a long time ago without meaning to, that the deepest respect you can pay some people is to let them get back to work. "You've got a range to evaluate," he said. "I do, sir." "Then I won't keep you, Chief Warrant Officer." He came to attention one more time, unhurried, deliberate, a private thing this time, just the two of them at the rail, and she returned it, and that was the whole of it. Rourke took the silver star that lived in her pocket, the one she never wore, and she closed her hand around it for a moment, the way you touch a thing to be sure it is still there. And then she put it back in the pocket where it belonged, because it was never for the range, and never for Brunner, and never for show. It was Lund's, really. It always had been. And Chief Warrant Officer 5, Camille Rourke, walked back to firing point 6 and went down onto the mat and settled behind the rifle the way water finds its level, her hands quiet, her eyes flat and easy on the far target, and the range that had spent the whole morning certain she did not belong there held its breath, now to watch her work. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.